Well, good afternoon. We're here to talk about strategies for test taking and how to tackle exam questions. My name is Crystal Fuqua, and I'm an administrator and academic counselor with Student Disability Services. And this is my coworker, Abby May. She's going to be joining in here in just a little bit. But we just wanted to get started and maybe give you guys some strategies, some ideas that might help you as you move into more test taking, especially with midterms and then on into finals. But hopefully you can use these strategies for, years to come anytime you are taking a test. So we'll go ahead and get started. Just a couple of little funnies. That feeling when you take a test and you only know your name. I've been there several times. Not sure if that test was actually easy or I just did really badly. I've been there several times. This guy says on the day of the test, he used all of his test taking skills that his teacher was always talking about. So, pretty proud of himself. So, that's always good, especially Abby and I are former teachers. We always loved it when our kids would use their test taking skills. So, that's what we're going to talk about today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Abby. I do have a background in elementary education. I taught for about 7 years in the classroom. We dealt with lots of testing with our students. I understand. I'm going to take this off since we're socially distanced, so I can make sure you can hear me. I understand the anxiety that comes with testing. I understand the pressures that come with testing, but it's just like any other skill that you work hard to improve. You can work hard to improve your testing skills, hopefully get a little bit more comfortable with those. That's what we did in my classroom. It was talking about breaking down the question, thinking about really understanding what the question's asking you, and then having a strategy to move forward and hopefully answer the questions correctly. So today we will discuss how to decode 3 categories of exam questions. And what I mean by this is trying to decide what the question is asking you, but also the level of difficulty of the question. There are generally 3 categories that questions fit into. So if you can kind of identify those, it kind of helps you to prioritize. It helps you to have a strategy to break down those questions, and then hopefully being able to understand the questions will help relieve a little bit of testing anxiety. But we are going to talk about 3 different types of exams as well as 3 different types of exam questions. So we're going to talk about problem solving and quantitative questions. So having to do with numbers, having to do with maybe a word problem or a short answer problem that you have to solve. We're also going to talk about multiple choice questions. I know that those are very prevalent, especially in college, when you can circle an answer and fill out a Scantron and professors can grade it super easy. But also, you're probably going to see quite a few essay questions during your college career. So we're going to talk about just some ways to go about tackling those. All right. So like I said, we're going to try to work on really understanding what the question is asking us. So what does it mean to decode a question? It means breaking it down, really looking at the stimuli, really looking at the stem, understanding what's being asked, because your responses should align with the type of question. Again, like I said, this will help you use your appropriate strategies, and feeling a little bit more prepared to understand what these questions are asking will help reduce testing anxiety, hopefully. Okay, so 3 categories of exam questions that we're going to talk about: a green light question, a yellow light question, or a red light question. So we're going to use this traffic metaphor today because, it's something that we all do. We all get out on the roads. So hopefully it'll help you remember the strategy that we're talking about today. So a green light question is, pretty self-explanatory. It's going to be a go right ahead question. It's going to be a basic recall, factual questions. So their answers are straightforward. You either know the answer to these or you don't. So that's kind of like those easy ones that you can knock out pretty quickly and then leave some of the harder ones towards the end of the test. Now, don't get me wrong, some of these green light questions can be a little bit difficult. If you don't know the answer right away, flag it, mark it, highlight it, go back to it. Okay. Don't spend all your time fretting over a green light question. If you don't know it, move on. A lot of times there might be hints in other questions that will kind of clue you into what the answer was on the question you were stuck on. Like I said, these kinds of questions are really just basic recall, and it's testing your ability to recall the information. So it may be a definition, it may be a formula, just something, it's just a black and white answer is what I'm trying to say. So to study for this type of question, recitation definitely helps, reciting things to yourself. You can do this with flashcards, you can quiz yourself with a partner. There's lots of cool apps and things like that. Quizlet, I know a lot of students have success with Quizlet and they use that quite a bit. You can, create your flashcards. You can search from search from a bank of flashcards and really study those green light questions that way.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Sure.
I just wanted to point out, I'm sorry, guys, on the last slide and on this one, and probably on the next one, the little graphic that we used, for whatever reason, it worked on the computer downstairs, and now it's covering part of the words. So sorry about that.
Thank you for pointing that out. So a yellow light question, just like you see with a yellow light, it is cue for you to slow down. Okay, it's not cue for you to race and try to beat the yellow. I do suggest slowing down on these questions. They're a little bit more detailed, but it's still going to be that either you know it or you don't. Often these are going to be those details from the green light questions, except they'll be combined to be all of these together. So like an amalgamation of some different details in one question. So similar strategies work for the yellow and green questions, but you will need to recall many ideas, concepts, or formulas for one question. So kind of keep that in mind when you come to a question that's asking you to put some of these ideas together, that you need to slow down a bit. You need to make sure you understand what it's asking you so that your answer can be appropriate for that type of question. And then these red light questions, these are the ones that are probably going to be worth a few more points. They're going to be the ones that are a little bit more difficult. And these are really going to require you to think critically. A lot of the times, this is where students get stumped, is that they can regurgitate the information, they can tell you all the definitions, but on the test, a lot of times professors want to see what can you do with that information. So you need to know the material being covered, but then you also need to step out on a limb a little bit and decide how to use that information in a new way, in ways you haven't used it yet. So this is not as concrete. It's not as black and white. You're having to make some inferences. You're having to draw some conclusions, synthesizing that information into a new idea or a new concept or a new answer. This question can be overwhelming. I know a lot of my students, when I was in the classroom, said, Miss May, that one looked long. I just guessed. I didn't want to read it. And I was like, please don't do that. Read it, highlight key phrases, jot some notes in the margin. Keep in mind that some of this stuff may not have been directly covered in class, but that's part of where your creative thinking and your critical thinking comes into play for you to put those pieces together in a new way. So don't let that hang you up. Just know that that's coming, and kind of practice with arranging information and manipulating information. So to study for red light questions, maps, diagrams, there's lots of cool materials and resources available that are thinking maps or that are concept maps. Really think about what you learned in other classes. Think about your personal experience and kind of see how those ideas and that information flow together and relate to one another.
All right, so now we're going to look at a link here that you can actually access within this PowerPoint. All right, so basically, if you do access this document, it is going to show you the tips and the tools that we just went over for green light, yellow light, and red light type questioning. But we want you to look at the second page right now. So we're going to look at that together. And we just want to show you what we're talking about when we talk about decoding. So when you see questions like this on your test, you'll be able to know kind of what to ask yourself when it comes to these kind of questions. So if you look at number 1, the question is, what is bootstrapping? Explain. And so we're going to ask you guys to kind of take a look at this on your own for just a minute. Decide whether you think it's a red light, yellow light, or green light type question, and why. And we'll give you, maybe 30 or 40 seconds. See what you can figure out, and then we're going to talk about it here in just a minute. Okay, so we're going to talk about number one. And again, the question is, what is bootstrapping? Explain. Is it a red, yellow, or green question, and why? So what I'm going to do now is one of our academic counselors, Elizabeth, is on, and I'm going to ask her to give us her thoughts as to what the question might be.
Well, I definitely think it's between red or yellow since it's more of an open-ended question and you have to explain your reasoning. It's not like a yes or no or a multiple choice. And so, since it's more definition, I would probably lean towards yellow since it's not as complicated as a red, but you still have to give it that thought.
Perfect. Okay, so we don't have an answer guide for this, but what we did is we kind of did some digging and some talking amongst Abby and I. And so my thought was also that it was yellow. And basically, it was what you just said because it is open ended. It's kind of a more difficult question. Not everybody is going to know what bootstrapping is. I certainly didn't. But Miss Abby pointed out that she thinks that it's green. And the reason she thinks it's green is because it's a definition question. It's straightforward. You can practice for this kind of question by using flashcards or recitation, that kind of thing. Now, the word explain does kind of, for me, put it between the green and yellow because it is kind of asking not necessarily your opinion, but not necessarily a straightforward definition from the dictionary. So somewhere between green and yellow.
But I also will say that some of these also do depend on your perception. They depend on, hey, I'm a business economics major. I can tell you like that what bootstrapping is. If you're comfortable with the content, all of these questions may seem green to you. So do kind of keep that in mind. It does kind of depend on your perspective and things like that. And, it's kind of a valuable conversation to hear Elizabeth say, well, I thought it was red because it's open-ended and because it's explained, and for Crystal to have her kind of view on that. And so there's not a right or wrong answer necessarily. It's just kind of getting your mindset to understand so that you can start moving towards a correct answer. So focusing on that word explain, that's really big. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit with our essay questions. Got to follow the instructions in the STEM. And so it may be enough just to write the definition. You may need to do a little bit deeper than that. It depends on the subject, depends on the content, really. So good conversation.
Okay, so look at number two, and it says a regression equation for y equals handspan centimeters and x equals height inches is expressed with the following formula. Average height equals 51.1 plus 0.7 handspan. So the actual question here is interpret the slope of 0.7 in terms of how height changes as handspan increases. So think about that one for a few seconds. Would that be red, yellow, or green?
And also, I'd like to know the answer. So get going on your math. Just kidding. I have no idea.
Okay, so Miss Caitlin, since you're on with us, tell us what you think about this question.
I personally really enjoy math, and I'm kind of viewing this as a green because I can study my slope equation with a formula and I can just kind of plug in the numbers and do the problem. But I could definitely see how this could also be a yellow because you want to be slow, make sure you're putting in the right numbers and interpreting it properly.
Exactly. So when we were looking at these, we thought for sure this would be a yellow, but as we talk, and as you just pointed out, you're really comfortable with math and you're a math person. And so for you, this is going to be green probably, because like you said, you can practice these things and study these things, but it does come down to probably a yellow, just because you do have to slow down. You may not know this right off the bat, you have to work it out and things like that. And so interestingly, just like we've said, it's going to vary from person to person, but it's more than likely a yellow. So on number three, we're going to kind of fly through this one. Use Weber's definition of power to explain the rise of Al Qaeda in the 21st century. So this one is definitely red. And that was interesting to me just because I thought, oh, well, it's yellow. Somebody probably knows this. But if you really look at the question and dissect it, it's not asking you just to find the definition. It's asking you to use Weber's definition of power and explain the rise of Al Qaeda in the 21st century. And so you're not finding the definition of power. You're using the definition of power to explain the rise of that group. And so this one is definitely one of those that is more difficult because you do have to put a lot of thought and effort into this.
But again, you may feel comfortable with the content and maybe it's more of a yellow for you.
Right.
But it's just that manipulation of information.
All right. So moving on, next we're going to talk about problem solving and quantitative questions. So these are going to be your questions that have to deal with an actual word problem or an actual question of just numbers. So as you work on these problems, remember, you do want to let yourself be stuck. And we do mean that. The research shows that you need to get your stuck muscles stronger so that you know what to do on tests when you do feel stuck. And so it's okay if you are on a question and you feel, oh, I don't know what to do next. That's okay. Be stuck. Don't sneak a peek at the answer if you get stuck. Just keep trying. I know answers aren't usually available on tests, but even on like practice tests or on homework that you might have, sometimes there's answers at the back. Don't sneak a peek. Be stuck for a while, try to work it out, and then check your answer only after you put anything down, okay? Don't leave anything blank. Think partial credit. A lot of your professors are willing to give you at least partial credit, which is better than no credit, because they appreciate the effort that you put in and they see that you have tried. So if you freeze when you get stuck on a hard problem, instead of shutting down, use these strategies to move through those things that are sticky. All right, so next, let's talk about multiple choice tests. Of course, these are going to be probably more than likely the tests that you guys are really taking. I know you have several different kinds of tests, but multiple choice tests seem to be the most popular. So when you're taking a multiple choice test, always, first and foremost, read the stem. And the stem is like the absolute meat and potatoes of the question. Make sure you understand what the question is asking. Make sure that when you read a question that's, asking you about dogs and cats, that you're not getting too hung up on something else in the wording of the question. Maybe they said something about the fish at the pet store, but the question's actually about the dogs and the cats. Don't get hung up on the fish. Read the stem and understand what the question's asking. Second, try to come up with the correct answer. It's going to help you rule out those choices that are similar to the correct answer. A lot of times they want to trick you and they're going to put answers that are similar to each other. So if you can try to come up with the correct answer, that's going to help you rule out the ones that you don't need. Third, look for clues. The correct answer must make sense grammatically. Of course, it must make sense just in the grand scheme of things, but also grammatically. If a question is asking you something where you know the answer needs to be in a plural form, then don't select an answer that's in a singular form. Okay? So look for those kind of clues. Eliminate your clearly incorrect answers. If you know in your gut that something is incorrect, eliminate it, mark it out. And then lastly, always go back to items you were unsure of. Whether you need to star it or circle it or mark it somehow, if you're unsure of a question and you answered it, but you're still unsure of it, mark it and go back to it. You'll often find that in other questions through the test, there were clues for that one that you were unsure of. So this additional strategies to consider, this is a little video that we put in. We are actually running really short on time. So we're going to leave that. It will be in the presentation and feel free to watch it. It's a cute little 3-minute video.
Okay, so so far we've talked about quantitative and problem solving tests, and we've talked about multiple choice tests. So another common type of test or test question is going to be your essay type questions. So definitely I would take a little bit of time right at the beginning and look through them. I would kind of see how many they're worth. I would see what I felt the most comfortable with, and I would prioritize in that way. So if I know number one, forwards and backwards, either you could leave it to the end, you may start with it, get it out of the way, build up some confidence, and then move on to the little bit of harder ones. But do kind of consider those things when you're starting. You don't have to go in order. Do read the directions carefully. A lot of times points are lost just for a simple step in the direction. Like you must cite your sources in this way, or you must make sure it is this format. So some of those things that are easy to save points on make sure you're doing those things. And then also so that you write about what the question is asking. A lot of times, you may be interested and you may feel like something else is important to add on, but if it's not directly answering the question, I would leave it unless you have time to come back and put it in later. So what I would do is decide on your argument. So I'm definitely for this, or I'm definitely against this, and jot down your supporting evidence. So your topic sentence, your main idea, jot down a few ideas that support it. I would call this a brain dump with my students. Jot down everything you can think of that you might want to add, put a star beside the most important things, and then you can make a quick outline just to kind of organize your thoughts and your arguments out to the side, just bullets. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is what I'm going to write about. Then go ahead and get started and try to make your point right away. Especially on these timed exams, you don't have time to do a big flourishing introduction. Get to your point quickly so that way, should you run out of time, you've at least answered the question. And then go back and proofread if you have time. So like I said, we have some words to watch for. Kind of when we were going back to those green, yellow, and red questions, looking at the bootstrapping question. This is just words to watch for in essay questions, and it defines them for you. So like we said, that word, what was it? Explain. Make an idea clear. Show logically how a concept is developed. Give a reason for the event. So it's kind of good to read over those, to be prepared for those verbs. This is the action that you're doing. You've got to make sure that you include this. So for example, break into separate parts and discuss, examine, and interpret each part. That's analyze, right? And then another good example would be summarize. Give a brief, condensed account. Avoid unnecessary details. Whereas describe is asking you to give a detailed account. Make a picture with your words. List characteristics, qualities, include those details that help define. So that's kind of a good thing to keep in mind as you're going into essay questions. Do you want to add anything on that, Crystal?
No, I think sometimes even it doesn't matter how old we are, how long we've been in school, what degrees we have. A lot of times when we're writing essay questions, we do get tripped up over summarize and describe. Just always remember that summarize is short. That's the way I always remembered it, and that's the way I used to teach my students. The S and the S, summarize and short. Don't get those confused, because a lot of times professors will count off if they ask you to summarize and you have written, 9 pages about one topic. But yeah, there's lots of helpful information on this page. Again, you can go into the presentation and find that if you want to print it out and keep it with you. So hopefully you've gained some information that you think might be helpful for you when you are studying for your tests that are upcoming or in the future. And so now, if anybody has any questions, chime in. We'll be here a few minutes to answer those. You can type it in the chat box if you'd like, or if you want to raise your hand or anything like that, we'll be here for a few minutes.
And then on that very last slide that we have, it is the website that we use to find this information. It all came from Cornell University. They've got some good points, and there's kind of some other tools on the side about different types of tests, how to study for those tests, things like that. So that's definitely a good website for you to check out later on whenever you have time to kind of review that. We appreciate you guys joining us today. There's also a link to a survey that Elizabeth sent out, or she will send out, just because we are here for you guys and we want to know what you want to learn about. So if there's any other topics or ideas that you would like us to do a presentation on, we'd be happy to do the research and kind of gather some materials so that we can help you with things that you're finding challenging.
If there's no questions, we're going to go ahead and log off. Again, I'm Crystal Fuqua, and this is Abby May that was with me, and we are located in the SDS office. So if you ever have any questions for us, just let us know. Thank you very much.